Well, hello and welcome to our podcast for DocuTrial, the new and innovative product for documenting trials. I'd like to introduce you to a couple of very important members of the DocuTrial team. We've got our founder and president, William Dirkes, Dr. William Dirkes. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Jason.
And then I'd also like to introduce you to Ken Paley. He's our director of marketing.
Hello there.
Hey, Ken, how are you?
Doing well, thank you.
Great. Well, we've got some exciting things to talk about today. Obviously, we've spent some time recently doing some really exciting behind the scenes work on the product and the system. And if I could, I'd love to get it started with you, Dr. Dirkes, to maybe give us a little bit of a history about the product and the system itself, and walk us through some of the recent changes you've had.
Okay, sure. So really, this started in my mind in some respect back around 2007. I actually started with a central IRB. And when I did that, I very quickly was overwhelmed with the paper that we were generating for sites. And I was with the IRB for 3 years and then went out and started my own site, and again saw actually even more firsthand what the sites were dealing with in paper, and quickly realized we needed a better system and started thinking about electronic. And we went through several different iterations over the years, and then finally in 2016 developed a system that we called Central Binders, which really was a way for us to have all of our documents centrally and replace the binders that are a big part of clinical trials. And since that time, we've been developing the product further and adding modules so that we now have a clinical trial management system for sites to put patient information in and search for patients with different diagnoses, et cetera. And then we've also added the electronic data capture so that we have the capability to have data from beginning to end of a trial all in one place.
Great. And let's talk a little bit about the evolution of the name. It started as Central Binders. Recently, we've converted it over to DocuTrial. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we realized that as we added those modules that we wanted to have the name reflect the additional capabilities and the fact that we're documenting a trial from beginning to end now.
Great. So great name. Simple, just like your system, completely right. Simple, straight to the point, right?
Exactly.
And Ken, from a marketing perspective, can you just talk about some of the very slight part of this, the discussion around the name change and how this works in regards to the overarching structure of the company in general and some of the other things that are happening?
Sure. As Bill mentioned, as the system evolved and we realized that it meant different things to different parts of the organization, we decided that from a branding standpoint, it made some sense to kind of separate and distinguish what each particular system meant to each particular part of the process. So in other words, if we're doing DocuTrial and we're monitoring the patient activity and everything that goes around that, that's not necessarily the same thing as a CTMS system where we're looking more at the business aspects. So as the company grows and expands its capabilities, I think it's necessary to distinguish between the different systems that we have so that the users will understand what's good for them in that system and why they might want to use it.
Great. Thank you for that. Back to you, Dr. Dirkes. What are some of the features that you feel make this system special? And then also as a secondary piece to that, in comparison to some of the competitors that are in the same set?
Yeah, I think probably the biggest thing that makes us special is the simplicity of the system. It the system is designed so that it's got a lot of flexibility so that it will work the way that you work. You don't have to change the way you work to work with the system. And it's simple to both implement and to utilize. And that makes a big difference, especially sites. They're busy and they don't want to have a lot of time training and a lot of frustrations day to day working with a system. We call it the Simply Smart Toolbox, so that all your tools are in one place and you can do your job without a lot of hassles.
Let's talk about the patient interaction. I know there's some special feature components that are in the system that really allow the people that are running the trial to interact with those people that are within the trial and sort of that personal connection. Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I'll back up here a little bit, but you asked about what makes us different from the other systems, our competitors. And one of the things is, if you look at the other systems, actually with our system, we were designed by a site for use at a site. The other systems, the major competitors, they were designed by people who had done work at sites, but they were more kind of on the management end of things. And they were really computer guys. So it was a computer system designed for a site. We were a site who designed a computer system. And that's what makes it different. And it especially shows when you're with patients. So that we're simply taking an Apple iPad and writing with the Apple Pencil and to capture the data. And so when you're sitting down with a patient, it's no different than using paper. And, when you're with a patient and you're taking their blood pressure and they tell you that one of their medications was changed, with the other systems, you have to leave the page you're on and you may be saving a partial completed form and moving to another form to write that information down or to capture that data. With our system, you can simply write yourself a note on the page wherever you want and then come back later and then fill that information in on the concomitant med page.
And there's also some level of personal connection where eye contact comes into play, that bedside manner, if you will, instead of going to a computer terminal as well and looking away from them and typing something in and then coming back. It's that natural relationship that you have with that person as well, correct?
Yeah, exactly. And that personal relationship is key in clinical trials. Remember, patients have fear of just going to their physician, and now they're going essentially to a physician for a drug that's being tested. And so I think that fear is a little bit heightened, and making that eye contact is important. And again, the way this works is really no different than paper. And so you're not distracted by a keyboard and a mouse or other, there have been a lot of different workarounds to try and get an electronic medical record system to work, to get that data in there. You don't have to deal with any of those workarounds. You're directly entering the data just like you would on paper, and you can still maintain that eye contact and interaction without being distracted.
Right. One of the things you've spoken with me about at length is the simplicity of the system and the need for a high level of tech support or a huge staff. And you've really created your system to be much less reliant on those types of things, correct?
Exactly. Yeah, so our system, like I say, it works the way you work, which makes the implementation easy. We've had sites where we've done about an hour of training and they are up and running. In fact, recently we had a site that got a COVID trial that they needed to get up and going quickly. And they saw our system on Monday morning. We signed the contract Monday afternoon. We did some training about some special features to put into their source documents on Wednesday, and then that took about 50 minutes, and that was with one person, just the person who creates the source docs. And then I trained the chief coordinator on Thursday. And this study was a little different because it was in the hospital. And because of the concern of infection, of course, they didn't want papers going back and forth. So they wanted electronic consent, which we have. And the other thing is that they were essentially deputizing the nurses in the hospital to actually do the initial visit. The other visits will be done as an outpatient. And so they needed a system that was simple. So I trained the chief coordinator, and that was on Thursday, and she trained up the nursing staff. And I don't know how much time it took, but I don't think it was much because I didn't take more than an hour with her. And on Saturday, they enrolled their first patient. So in less than a week, we had them up and going and enrolling patients. You know, other systems, you know, I've heard take on average 6 hours of training for just the coordinators and additional training for the regulatory staff, et cetera.
Wow. Yeah. So you've really cut down the need for extensive training because it is such a natural system, natural input. It's just like writing on a piece of paper and taking notes within that. But you've also put some safeguards in there as well. And I'd like for you to just chat about that for a minute, because I think the safeguards that you've put into the system are pretty innovative and different as far as being able to make edits to documents and what the FDA might allow and things like that.
Right. Yeah. So what's nice is that again, it works like paper. So you pull the document up on the iPad, you can write on it. The document will stay there however long you need it. And then when you save it, it saves to the system. And everything that was written on that page gets, I like to say, kind of burned in to the document so that it can't be changed later. And that's one of the FDA requirements, is that once you save data, it can't be changed. So, but like your paper, unfortunately, changes need to be made, right? Sometimes you make mistakes, put the wrong date, et cetera. And again, it works like paper. You pull that document up on the iPad and you use the pencil and you cross through the incorrect data, initial and date it, and write the correct data, and then save it again.
So not only are you getting secure information and making sure that that's all secure, but you also have an audit trail as well that also gives you some timing too of when those edits were made and things like that, which is obviously beneficial, something you're not getting on traditional paper as well.
That's right. And of course, that's all required by the FDA, and it meets those requirements.
Great. All right. Let's go a little deeper now. Let's, instead of going top down, which is normally how we do it in these conversations, I'd like to actually go bottom up, because I think the people that are using this system on the daily basis are maybe the most important feature of this. So let's talk about the coordinators. What are they liking about the system? What are they benefiting from? What are some of the features that are really helpful? And I know we've touched on some of those, but just from your experience with the relationships that you have with those coordinators, what are they seeing in this that makes it special for them?
Yeah, I think the big thing is it makes their job easier, so that they have everything with them at all times. And it's easy for them to just pick up the iPad and get started with a visit. They pull up the documents. If there's a question that they need to look at in the protocol, they have the protocol available. They can pull that up. And then they press a button and the documents are filed. And they're not looking for the binder that they need to put it in the right place and getting it in the right tab, et cetera. So those things are all important. You know, I like to tell the story about when I started with my coordinators. This was 4 years ago. You know, of course, there's a lot of fear about going electronic for a lot of people. And so I said, we're going to start with a new study. And this study was just starting up, and we're not going to start on Monday. We're going to start on Tuesday so we can make sure we have everything in place on Monday. And so on Tuesday we started, and we had a couple of visits for this one study that day. And by the end of the week, my coordinators came to me and they all said, we want to do this for everything. And I think that's another piece to this puzzle is a lot of the other systems, people are starting just with new studies. But when my coordinator said that, what we did was we already had a lot of things electronic. We took everything that we had and I put it in the system over the weekend. And that following Monday, we had every study ready to start in the system. And we then all our visits were electronic from that day forward.
And let's talk about disaster recovery and things like that. Obviously, your system is electronic. How does that benefit a site, for instance, with keeping those documents and making sure that the storage is safe?
Yeah, well, of course, it's a cloud-based system, and so everything is stored actually on the Microsoft Azure system, which is their cloud system, in servers, and it's backed up to 2 other geographically differently located servers, so that if a tornado hits, you're not losing your data. Floods, fires you're protected against all those, which you don't have with paper, right? You have that storage and you may have a sprinkler system, but that still doesn't protect you against fire.
Could you just maybe try to give me the wrap up? Like if I had to ask you, give me the 30-second elevator speech on what benefits the coordinators the most from the system. What would you say if we asked them what that would be? And probably the best person for me to ask that question is Ken, because I know Ken did some extensive surveys and research with those coordinators as well. Ken, would you like to maybe just talk about some of the things that they said?
As Bill's marketing director, it's extremely important to me to understand what our users are thinking and what they're experiencing. So what I'm going to read to you now are actual verbatims from some of the coordinators that I've talked to who are using the system. So these are not my words or Bill's words. This is their actual experience. So here's the first one. Now we do everything all in one place, easily accessible, shareable, and transferable. It's an electronic ISF, electronic source, anything your monitor or CRA possibly needs. The regulatory binder is set up. Click and just sort for the document. It mimics the paper binder. It has replicated what we see in a paper system, and it isn't hard to follow. I look at it as an electronic file cabinet. All of the trial folders are housed on the system, and we have access to it, and you can pull it anytime you want. All the patient data, source, and investigator site files are available electronically and organized, so you can find it quickly. It's an e-portal and remote database for patient data and ISF. And then on a day-to-day basis, this is what came to mind for our users, for our coordinators in this case. I can handwrite anything. It's expandable, it's flexible. There's no programming, you just download and upload. Can handle multiple, maybe 10 plus studies. It's very straightforward. It's easy to navigate. It matches the regulatory formats. Overall, I'd say they were pretty happy campers and enjoy using the system and like what it does for them.
Dr. Dirkes, let's move back and let's do the same for monitors. Let's talk about some of the benefits for the monitors and some of the things that they like.
The big thing for the monitors is the flexibility in how they work and when they work and where they work. And so they have access to the data 24/7. And, we've had monitors come here, and because they were still being required to make a site visit, and they are at our office but doing everything on their laptop. There's no paper for them to see. And then they realize that they can catch an earlier flight to get home to their family. So they leave our site early, head out to the airport and finish up what they need to do at the airport on the way home.
And so what you're saying basically is we've removed the need, if the monitors want to approach it that way, we've removed the need for them to actually be on site when they can audit the data from anywhere because it's all captured in the cloud.
Right. So yes, and it's not only that, but they get it instantly, which is important. They're getting the data a lot earlier. The monitor's responsibility, one of them is to do what's called source data verification, or SDV. And the SDV that's normally done depends on when the monitor is coming to the site versus when the visit occurred. And, I actually looked at one of our trials recently, and from the time that we actually entered the data into the EDC system to the time that the source data verification occurred was a median range of 61 to 273 days. So that's time that, it makes me wonder if you can really justify to the FDA that you're doing the oversight that monitors are supposed to be doing. Whereas with our system, you can do that source data verification really instantly.
Wow, that's amazing. And Ken, I know you also talked to some of the monitors. You want to quickly chat and give us some insights from them?
Yeah, I think they made some very good points. What the monitor said is it keeps everyone accountable. It's a big time and cost savings for the CRO. I don't have to bug the coordinators to see if something like an amendment is done or there. I can just look it up. I have the data right away rather than waiting 4 to 6 weeks for the next visit. So overall, they see the time savings as well, and of course the cost savings associated with it. I have the data right away rather than waiting 4 to 6 weeks I just mentioned, and not sifting through multiple binders because things get misfiled with paper.
Yeah, it's funny, the world has really changed about people doing business travel. And so this obviously has a benefit as we go on into the future of allowing those monitors to really be more flexible in the way that they approach these studies.
Yeah, and they also mentioned that it's documented in real time. I have it ready at my fingertips because many documents are constantly updated.
Right.
Yeah, Jason, when you talk about how business travel, et cetera, has changed, one of the ways a lot of the CROs and sponsors are trying to deal with that is they're asking the sites to scan their paper into a system, and then sometimes it needs to be redacted, et cetera. And that's a huge burden on the sites. And they're pushing back and asking for extra money and trying to get new contracts in place for that, et cetera. And then from the CRO sponsor standpoint, you have the problem that if that data changes on that paper, you may never know it because it may not get scanned again. Whereas with our system, you don't have to wait for it to be scanned. It's there right away, and any changes you will see.
That's obviously a good segue into our sponsors and what some of the benefits are for them as well. So let's talk about the sponsors and what benefit they get from deploying this system along with the monitors and the coordinators.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for the sponsors is time. And, I've heard for years that the average study, the cost is $1 million a day. So any days that you can cut off make a difference. And again, back to that SDV time of 61 to 273 days, that's real money. Even if it's not $1 million a day, it's still a lot of money. And that's after we would complete our EDC in 0 to 2 days. And then this is the time after that. The other thing is that there seems to be a lot of, I feel like it's kind of hamster wheel work, or at least at the site we do, regarding the queries in the electronic data capture systems. And again, I looked at data for one of our studies, and the median time from the time that a query was opened to the time that it was closed was 9.7 days. And that wasn't all our time. Our time was less than that. But again, with the volume of queries, a lot of times, from the site, we get a query and we feel like there's an answer they want, but we don't know which answer it is. And that's frustrating. And then they refer us to their manual that's, 80 pages long, and I have to go to page 67 to figure out how I'm supposed to answer that. It should be much easier and quicker than that, and we have that capability.
So Ken, I know that you had some comments from sponsors as well, and also from what the monitors get feedback from with the sponsors. So let's talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, just a couple of key points that came up regarding sponsors. One was an audit trail. I feel good about that. The security of the system, obviously very important. It's a validated system in GCP with good clinical practices and ICH guidelines. Uh, and it's documented on the source data agreement. So along with the cost savings that constantly came up, the fact that it was just a much simpler system for both the monitors and coordinators kind of trickles through, and they say, you know, that's a good thing for our people.
So another thing that we'll talk about that's good for everybody in this system is communication. And I think that's something you've spoken about in the past, Dr. Dirkes. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about communication within the system and how that actually works on a daily basis.
Yeah, so, of course, we've talked about the fact that everything's available to everybody at all times, 24/7. We also have capabilities within the system to do what we like to call sticky notes, and monitors are familiar with those, where there's a question about a certain section of a document. They may put a sticky note on it with that question, and then we're asked to respond or fix it. And we have that within the system so that the monitor can put a sticky note or a question, and that can be addressed, and then the sticky note can be removed, and there's no audit trail on any of that. And then we also have capabilities for monitors to query, so that if something needs to be changed within the electronic data capture system, that change can be made, and that is part of an audit trail. But one of the features of our data system is that the monitors can SDV while they are at the same time. Well, let me back up, so that they can SDV concurrently with viewing the documents, and can query right there in the same system at the same time.
And from the coordinator standpoint, don't they have the ability to communicate a little bit between each other as well at the site?
Right. So one of my coordinators loves to use those sticky notes to write herself notes. So she can put a sticky note that's not part of the document, but it alerts her or reminds her of something else she needs to do, or she can send it to a regulatory person or to another coordinator and ask them to make the changes that are needed.
Well, Dr. Dirkes and Ken, I'd love to thank you for joining us today. And I'd love to wrap up with just some overarching thoughts about this product. It's an amazing product. It really is. And not only is it an amazing product, but it's a proven product. And Dr. Dirkes, you walk the walk on a daily basis. You've used the product and developed it at the same time. You obviously have the ability to see what's happening, be able to benefit all parties. So let's talk about some of that in this changing world that we're in. What are some of the benefits to all of the parties as a whole, and what do you get the most out of with this product?
Yeah, again, the major benefit is that it's simple, and so it's easy for a site to use, which means it's easy for a sponsor to provide. And I think a lot of sponsors have been hesitant to provide electronic source systems because they're worried about the burden on the sites, and sites are already burdened a lot. The system clearly benefits all three groups that we've talked about: coordinators, monitors, and sponsors. And there are a lot of different ways, from the paper savings at the site to the savings in time and travel of monitors, and for sponsors, the quick access to the data.
And Ken, that's an amazing opportunity, obviously, for these people to take on a system that's simple, easy to use, cost savings. And we know that cost savings is a big one. Can you talk a little bit about cost savings with the product?
Sure. And I just want to emphasize what you just mentioned, and that is what struck me the most, first of all, when I learned about the whole system, and then when I talked to the users about their experience, this whole idea of simplicity is just key. And it doesn't have to be complicated. You don't have to have a big tech team. And remember, it came from a group that said, this is too complicated. Let's try and come up with something that's simple. And what does some simplicity lead to? Besides a much more efficient system, it leads to a lot of cost savings. So if you don't have to make a lot of visits to the site and have all those travel costs, if you're not wasting time looking for paper or looking for files or trying to contact the site and see what's going on, or if you don't have to spend 6 or 8 hours on training, all of these things lead to a lot of cost savings. So to me, the two key things are the simplicity leads to a much smoother process, and a smoother process leads to folks who enjoy their work a lot more. And guess what? Those coordinators can concentrate more on the actual patients and not be worried about what's going on in the process. And when you only need a couple hours of training and you're off on your own, that builds a lot of confidence in both you and your team. And knowing that the DocuTrial team is available 24/7 if you need them, that's also something that is a very kind of easy thing to get along with when you're talking about simplicity. The Simply Smart Toolbox just didn't come out of thin air. It really is simple, and it really is a toolbox for anything that you need.
Great. So Dr. Dirkes, let's talk a little bit about how people can get in touch with you, learn more about the product, get a demo, if you will. One thing that I will say before we go into that is we are going to do a follow-up podcast where we demo the product and we show a little bit about how it works both on the online system and on the iPad. But in the meantime, if somebody wants a more personal approach to that, how can they get in touch with you?
Well, certainly you can visit our site, DocuTrial.com, or you can email us at info@DocuTrial.com, or you can give us a call on the phone at 513-791-1600.
Great. Well, I'd like to thank you both for your time today. It's been very informative, and I definitely am looking forward to seeing the demo in the next podcast, maybe a week or so from now. But we thank everybody for being with us and watching, and we will see you very soon.
Great. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you.